Everybody, please gather in front of the fire, for I have a scary story to tell you all. What if I told you that there is a game out there, a game that has managed to fuse together crisp third-person shooting mechanics, high-octane fast movement, and extensive customization, all while being wrapped up in a sci-fi blanket woven by some of the better minds behind sci-fi media in the 21st century. I know, got you a little intrigued, didn't I? Now get ready for this. What if I told you that game was live service? It gets worse. That game has NFTs. Hello there, welcome back to I Suck at Video Games, and today we are doing something a little different here today. Something that is not necessarily a long-form review, nor is it a compilation of me failing to be remotely good at this game. This video is an attempt at a commentary and illustrating a point about live service games that I do not see often discussed when people speak about their ire with the live service genre. To do so, we'll be discussing a game called Off the Grid, which is a battle royale extraction shooter from Gunzilla Games, who had made some waves a few years back when they had signed on South African director Neil Blomkamp as the chief creative officer, overseeing the aesthetic of the game and its narrative. I gravitated towards this game because I'm actually a fan of Blomkamp's work as a director, with his critically acclaimed film District 9 alongside other films such as Elysium and Chappie. The design of the exosuits, the technology, the look of the characters, and honestly the entire world that's around the player is very much a Neil Blomkamp designed sci-fi cyberpunk world, and to me it fits with the technology seen in his movies, specifically Elysium. Off the Grid will be the conduit in which I pass all of my judgment and frustrations with live service games through to illustrate the main point that I want to make is they're honestly just a waste of potentially good ideas and especially good talent behind the scenes. To explain what I mean by this, we will dissect the game into three chunks. First, we will look into development and execution, where we will discuss some of the people behind the scenes of Off the Grid and their background specifically, and also about why I think the game should not have been a live service extraction shooter to begin with. Then transitioning into gameplay, where I will reluctantly tell you how much I actually enjoy the gunplay and mechanics of Off the Grid, and then lastly we will look into the NFT side of things surrounding the game and also question Off the Grid's future ahead. So with that being said, I hope you enjoy the video and leave a like if you do. In all honesty, I do not plan on making these types of videos a lot going further. In the initial run of this channel, I did a lot more commentary content, and honestly, I just do not have anything different to say for most subjects, and my opinion is just that, an opinion. And probably with this video, I'm probably not saying anything different than you haven't heard before from other people talking about other live service games. But here, I felt compelled to sit down and think about this game and just what problems I have with Off the Grid, more so for what it represents, not so much the gameplay itself, because again, I actually do like this game. So without further ado, let's begin the video. Off the Grid was developed by Gunzilla Games, which, to my research, is based in 3 different countries, Ukraine, Germany, and England. The studio was co-founded by Vlad Korolov, Alex Zoll, or Joel, my apologies for mispronunciation, and Neil Blomkamp. That's right, Neil Blomkamp, who is the creative mind behind films such as District 9, Elysium, and Chappie. Blomkamp to me has this certain aesthetic design to his depiction of sci-fi dystopias, and the design and look of the world within Off the Grid is very reminiscent of those 3 films. District 9 was a film that was widely praised by audience and critics alike and earned Blomkamp an Oscar nomination for Best Adapted Screenplay, and also the movie itself was nominated for Best Picture that year as well. While the film did not win either award, this was still a major achievement for Blomkamp, as he also showed to audiences that he could be capable of crafting an interesting sci-fi dystopian world that did not feel generic. Granted, District 9 is not just an action sci-fi film, but actually a film that discusses serious themes of racial segregation in South Africa through a sci-fi lens, so that is why the movie got more Oscar-worthy buzz. As I said before, Off the Grid in an aesthetic way is more similar to Elysium and maybe even Chappie as well than it is to District 9, so maybe that's a little foreboding. But anyways, the film Elysium is a bit of a different story. It was also written and directed by Blomkamp, and this film brought with it a much higher budget of $115 million as opposed to the $30 million for District 9, which, fun fact for those who don't know or don't remember, but that movie was produced by Peter Jackson, who was famously dressed as Santa Claus in Hot Fuzz and also directed a few movies too. Elysium was also a film that was much bigger in terms of the names attached to the film as well. Matt Damon was in the lead of the film and also featured other big names such as Jodie Foster and Charlton Copley, who was the only actor to appear across all three Blomkamp films. The movie did make some money at the box office, but did not necessarily blow many people away. I mean, I enjoyed the movie and even own it on Blu-ray, but it's not the greatest sci-fi film to ever exist, obviously. Like District 9, this movie also had themes and commented on the issues of class within the film, and I found them to be very on the nose within the movie. Why do I mention this though? If you recall, I said that Neil Blomkamp was listed as a co-founder on the Gunzilla Games webpage, and all of these movies feel like they are inadvertently inspiring the design and technology within the game of Off the Grid, but the wording in the statement used in his own bio on said webpage, in addition to a Rolling Stone article detailing his involvement in both Gunzilla and Off the Grid, both state that he joined on in 2020 as co-founder and chief creative officer. So I feel like it was a title given to him to bring some hype to the studio and hopefully build some intrigue as to what they could be cooking up with Neil now in the fold. Outside of Blomkamp, they have some other interesting names attached to the studio and Off the Grid. Gunzilla Games has individuals like Timur Davydenko, who is the chief technical officer and used to be the technical director at Crytek, specifically working with the Crytek engine, so he contributed to both the Crysis and Far Cry series. Gunzilla also boasts having Richard Morgan, who is an award-winning writer behind the book Altered Carbon, which also became a Netflix series. He also wrote the story for Crysis 2, so he has some experience working in video games and specifically single-player campaigns. There is actually a lot of overlap between this studio and having people who worked on Far Cry or Crysis at some point in their careers. So with that being said, you get these people who have worked with very big names in Hollywood and have shown some creative chops both in the sci-fi world, in film, and even in video games, and you do all of that to make a fucking live service title. A title that could very well fly under the radar and have no lasting impression because these games only progress the story if there is a substantial player count. Why on earth would you waste that type of talent behind the scenes? I have no idea, but I assure you that that is just the tip of the iceberg of wasted potential within this game. Moving forward, did you know that Neil Blomkamp is credited with directing all of the short cinematics within the game that help create the lore and build the world of Off the Grid? The game is said to have a 60-hour narrative campaign that is in the form of bios, text within the game, some awkward cutscenes that play as well before the matches, and also these cinematics that honestly look pretty good. The lead art director for Gunzilla is named Nicholas Gecko, and he also has a number of quality credits to his name in terms of creating concepts for a few Netflix films, and him and Blomkamp seemingly share a lot of creative visions for Off the Grid, and I think that shines through in its cinematics. Blomkamp himself has a history of creating short films and cinematics for other properties such as Halo Landfall, which was live action, but that still applies here, so it makes sense that he would still be in charge of creating some interesting cinematic set pieces to get people interested in the world of Off the Grid, which by all means is fucking balls to the wall. What I mean by that is that this world is a sci-fi dystopia, but done so in a very satirical and over-the-top kind of way. You get that feeling front and center with these cinematic and tutorials that play every time you boot up the game. Don't worry, you can't skip them. The opening cinematic shows a CEO or corporate presenter making a declaration to the audience in this giant stadium on the island, talking about the competition that is Off the Grid, a real-life battle royale that is globally broadcasted. People are swelling with excitement within the arena, and there's cuts to crowds of people across the globe cheering on in excitement. In this world, technology has progressed to the point of robotic enhancement, tissue regeneration, and of course, high-tech weaponry. We see that this blood sport has become very popular, not just to the former soldier, but in fact the everyday person. Your average Twitch streamer just has to sign a waiver, pass a physical, and they too can be surgically enhanced with robotic limbs and jetpacks. It's pretty zany, to be honest, as the arena combatants are overly excited to be a part of this madness. Even when their robotic limbs get blown right off their body, everybody seems to be cool with this event becoming larger and larger, with like a $100 million prize pool for the winners of OTG. People are horrified by what they see, but they also cannot stop watching. I might be the only one that sees this to be kind of ridiculous, though. Well, me and this guy, apparently.
Nothing in defense of this despicable island of depravity that you are personally responsible for. What the?
Oh my god, am I going insane? What's going on in the world?
I love this shit.
So again, they are utilizing the expertise of someone like Neil Blomkamp and his ability to craft some interesting short cinematics that introduce insight into the event itself and also the world that it exists in. All of this effort and all of this cool story potential for the world they've created, and I personally find it cannot be told to its true potential because of the Battle Royale formula. I feel like it would have been a more outside the box idea to do a single player campaign story that exists in this world with the Battle Royale going on. After that cinematic plays, we're transitioned into a sort of tutorial with the unofficial mascot of the game, Master Sergeant Cobra, who, fun fact, is motion captured and voiced by Charlton Copley. He runs down the components of the game's technology, the combat systems, and the game modes in a very over-the-top drill sergeant kind of way. He begins it by calling you a regurgitated cum bubble, and while it was funny to me the first time, it got old fast because he repeats it throughout the game. He's also the announcer while you're playing the game mode, so it does get old fast. As you can probably tell, I am personally not huge on battle royales and the live service genre as a whole, but the cinematics here and the basis of the gameplay got me intrigued enough to play it when it dropped on console. However though, taking all of this intrigue that is surely from the influence of someone like Neil Blomkamp through his aesthetic vision, past experience in creating interesting shorts, and obviously his name value, and putting it all into a type of game that depends solely on sustaining a player base long term that also spends a lot of money, feels very misplaced in my opinion. Like, imagine if there was no Red Dead Redemption, but there was still Red Dead Online. It would not hit the same, and it would definitely have people thinking that, like, hey, maybe a single player experience in this world with these mechanics would be pretty cool. That being said, rest in peace Red Dead Online, my sweet summer prince. Like, honestly, I feel like it is a travesty to have the amount of creative minds behind the scenes within Gunzilla for the result to be a surface-level narrative within an extraction shooter. Like, there is potential in the idea of a massive, globally broadcast Bloodsport event in a sci-fi dystopia. A single-player story could have surrounded a group of friends who entered the tournament thinking everything was going to be sweet and easy, only to be confronted by the horrors of Teardrop Island and maybe finding out things aren't as they seem on TV. That would be interesting, but that is not what we have here. I mean, honestly, that could very well be the case when this full game drops and the full promise narrative is delivered, but right now, we don't know that for sure. That being said though, Off the Grid is not the first game to waste an awesome idea on a live service title that would have been an incredible single player experience, nor will it be the last. Do you guys remember Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League? How about Marvel's Avengers? Both comic book themed games that had an amazing premise and a good sense of hype around them when they were first announced, only for that hype to be diminished entirely when it was announced that they would be squished and morphed into a live service game that wasted potentially terrific narratives. The fact that Rocksteady, the studio that really made its name with the absolute quality that is the Batman Arkham trilogy, all three single-player experiences that would be dropped after the narrative was completed, was seemingly forced to create this live service game, and that to me is a damn tragedy. What I hate most is when developers and publishers are surprised by backlash to these types of things and can never take the blame when it comes to these games failing. BioWare's Anthem is another good example of what could have been an interesting story and also an interesting world that was wasted in a half-baked live service game that ultimately never reached its goals or completed its roadmap. So for every live service game, there comes a breaking point where they call it and give up and scrap the plans going forward, and now both the game and its potential are dead. All these titles are in search of one thing, and that is the whale money that comes with certain players that will spend money on the game. And if you're Gunzilla Games, this appears to be working at least a little bit, because every lobby I enter, it is basically a given that someone on my team, maybe even both of my teammates, will have the little blue pro icon that indicates they have the battle pass equivalent in Off the Grid. At first I thought I got paired with a couple of pros in like one of my first games playing it, and I thought I was going to get carried to an easy dub, but that quickly turned out to not be the case. To recap, this chapter established the fact that I strongly believe that Gunzilla Games has the right minds behind the scenes. They have the components of a stellar game that could stand out if it was a different genre. You also might be asking yourself at this point, why do you have such a strong opinion on what is probably considered a pretty niche game for most people? Well, that's because the gameplay is actually quite fun. After that terrific segue, let's talk about the gameplay that is the basis of Off the Grid, and really the one thing that has kept me into the game. And obviously I'm not that good at the game first and foremost, and I have developed a little bit of skill at it, but I'm still quite shit at it. But obviously you don't need to be good at a certain game to be able to critique it or judge it or talk about it. The gameplay here is the same as basically every other battle royale in existence in both a bad and worse way. The game opens with those two cutscenes I mentioned earlier, but once you skip and or watch those, of course, you're greeted with the page for the OTG Pro Pass and the shiny new limited only cosmetics, which are both equally strange and laughable, but we'll talk about those later on. Then you can hop right into a game of their Extraction Royale, and Cobra gives you the rundown, and the cinematic plays you into the game with the ships carrying the players into the map for them to drop into, and the map is called Teardrop Island. Like Apex Legends, you drop in teams of 3 and then follow the same formula for every other game like it. Drop in, find loot, find more loot, kill enemies, take their loot, and obviously try to be the last team standing. But this game does have some elements of the extraction shooter genre as well, because Gunzilla wants its cake and to eat it too, apparently. It's honestly kind of an afterthought for me in most playthroughs, but the narrator himself loses his fucking mind over it every time an enemy team activates an extractor. But by extracting what are called hex cubes, it will allow the player to earn better unlocks in the game as well. You find small yellow mission blips that will help lead the player to the right direction to find the hex cubes, or you can find them by chance, extract them with the extractor, and then redeem them after the game ends. Now that's just the main guidelines of playing the game, but once you drop in, the real fun begins for me. The chests across the map will drop robotic upgrades for players for your legs and also each arm. These attachments are called cyber limbs and of course offer different passive or offensive abilities, such as the leg enhancements called leapers, which are what they sound like. They allow the player to jump high and makes for fast movement and surprise attacks. Other abilities fire drones, mortars, and even allow you and the allies around you to run really fast. The real offense comes in the form of the arm attachments specifically. They can be two different ones, so it adds a layer of customization and strategy to each game as well. There are even passive attachments for the arms as well, such as grappling hooks, which can be good for traversal and getting away from enemies, and also the ones that I mentioned that shoot drones. One can do damage and one is also good for just recon. The map itself is pretty good in my opinion. It's arguably pretty small, I feel like, especially compared to most maps in other battle royale shooters. The size feels right because while the game lobbies will be up to 150 players at full capacity when the game fully launches, currently though the game only allows up to 60 players in a lobby, and in my experience as a player that is coming in late, I still have not been in many full lobbies, honestly, as I am typically in lobbies with like under 50 players, so when it comes to teams of 3, that can dwindle pretty fast even with the game having respawn periods early in the game. One thing I have not talked about yet is the guns, and for the most part I really like them. In a sense of design, I think they fit the bill for this world, and like I said earlier in the video, they remind me of the weapons you saw in something like Elysium. Shotguns are fine for the most part, but I obviously only recommend using them within the buildings and in close quarters, as they are useless, as anywhere else people are moving too fast and too frequently to use them effectively. And I also mention this because sometimes you'll have these moments where every crate you open at the beginning of a game will be offering you shotgun after shotgun or sniper rifle after sniper rifle, and sometimes that can happen, so try to put yourself in buildings if that happens. I mostly use the LMGs within the game, as they typically have more than enough ammo to rip through an enemy's shield bars, but also even put them down and sometimes even killing them too. Running that with the shotgun can be a fun combo for quickly downing and taking out your enemies, as you will have to keep in mind at the earlier parts of the game, unless you wipe out the whole team, they will respawn in about 30 seconds. Also, the sounds within the game are pretty good for the most part. Like, they definitely fit the vibe they're going for, and the guns themselves sound pretty good as well, but it's not like mind melting or anything. It's just pretty good sound design.
Enemy down! Heads up. The grid's gonna overload. You know where it's are. Now, you animals. Yeah, computer. He's extracting the hex and little. Down.
Unsuccessful.
I'm afraid to report that the grid.
The core gameplay and the weaponry of Off the Grid is easily the best part of the game outside of the intrigue that is generated by the cinematics and the lore. The game of Extraction Royale itself does not take too long, and I'll again credit that to the map size. Things can start happening pretty fast depending on where in the map you land, just like any other BR shooter. Also, like any other free-to-play live service title, they also have a lovely selection of microtransactions. Yes, you are looking at a Kamala Harris themed skin for a Battle Royale shooter, which is definitely a sentence of all time, but also the Crackhead Santa package is in the shop at the time of this recording, so there's that as well. Also, there is a Donald Trump skin, of course, but for some reason that one feels like it fits here. I don't know why. I feel like with the insanity that Fortnite has become with their extensive catalog of various skins of other IPs and real fucking people, that the masses have basically become desensitized to the idea of these outrageous skins such as this. And personally, I've always been against it if your game is not cartoony like Fortnite, if that makes sense. Like, I'm specifically mentioning the Call of Duty Nicki Minaj operator skin. I usually draw the line when shit starts to get ridiculous in Call of Duty these days. That being said, at first when I was playing the game, I felt like they didn't necessarily railroad the player when it came to acquiring the gun currency to purchase weapons and skins and stuff like that, because I felt like at first I was earning quite a bit for my games. I was getting quite a good amount of XP and getting some kills, so I was getting some hexes as well when my teammates were, extracting them, and I was getting some currency and whatnot. And then I tried to sell some stuff on the store, and yeah, you can't do that. You have to purchase the ability to sell stuff on the store. I absolutely despise this system, but I also recently discovered that there is a reason for this, and that reason understandably scared many prospective players away from this title, especially within the PC sphere, but we'll talk about that in just a moment. You might be asking yourself, though, as we get to like the 30-minute point of this video, where is that supposed 60-hour narrative that you mentioned? Where's the context on that? You always comment on a game's story in your videos. Well, supposedly that's because most of the narrative is written into the Battle Royale mode, not specifically the Extraction Royale mode that is currently available to players. That's right, this game is early access! Since most of the minds behind this game joined Gunzilla in 2020, and with Off the Grid being basically their only game made so far, it's probably fair to say that production for Off the Grid had its earliest stages of development probably around this time. The game was officially announced in 2022 by Gunzilla, and they stated that they were originally planning to release the game in 2023, but then of course the game was delayed with no substantial release date given at that time. However, then fast forward to October of 2024 when the game was released onto early access on PC, and then eventually making its way to Xbox and PlayStation about a month later in late November. So I really don't get it, with one of their biggest selling points being the fact that they had this narrative that was being directed by, an Oscar-nominated director, just to have that said narrative be stored away in a Battle Royale mode that is not only not ready at release, but it's not even ready for the early access release, which is pretty damning in my opinion. Really, it goes without saying, but personally, I do not understand coming out with just one mode that is filled with what sounds like significantly lesser content, then hope to go early access and establish a player base that brings in that microtransaction / battle pass money, because after all, this is a free game. Then from there, hope to deliver the full package that was initially promised with the narrative-driven Battle Royale mode. It's like shooting yourself in the foot before running a marathon. You won't start strong and most likely won't even finish the race due to the damage caused. Which again echoes my sentiment from the first chapter, discussing the wasted potential that comes with the territory of creating a live service title after so many others have failed in this space in search of the same things. You have this game that has some seriously good stuff going on both from behind the scenes and within the game itself, but in my opinion it is squandered in a live service title, and it has the chance to not even get there because it's not even in a finished state. And if the game's base of players dies in early access, then what legs will the game have when they hopefully release the second game mode amidst a full release? I say hopefully because as of this writing and recording, there is no stated full release date for the Battle Royale or the whole game in general. Now, to be honest, I could see this game getting a moderate bump in players if it does wind up getting a fully publicized release with the story info and Battle Royale being completed. Do I see it lasting? Hard to say. Will the stay be meaningful enough for the higher-ups to deem it financially acceptable? Also hard to say. There is one thing that I believe holds this game back quite a bit. It's not on Steam. That's right, this game is on PC through the Epic Games Store, and I know most people have the Epic Games Store for the free games it provides, but honestly, I do not know many people who actively use it otherwise. People like Steam. People prefer to use Steam. So you might ask the question, why is it not available on Steam? last chapter here will be the shortest chapter because I feel like this is the most straightforward issue with the game. I also should make it clear that I am against the idea of NFTs and crypto being in video games. I do not think this is a wasted idea either or some form of wasted potential. I just simply wish to discuss this as something that I believe is holding the game back. Remember that currency I talked about briefly earlier? Well, if you remember, that currency was called Guns with a Z, and it is potentially becoming a cryptocurrency upon full release, and the in-game items can be used as NFTs. The tokens themselves can be mined and earned within the game, as mentioned before, through the gameplay mode, so it's not horrible, I guess, but I don't know how valuable it is, to be fair. Also, the most important factor to mention is that this whole NFT crypto implementation is entirely optional, which is the saving grace for some players, but that being said, it goes without saying that the title of Off the Grid being labeled as a, quote, NFT game certainly raises fears and eyebrows. So much so that the game's official FAQ page has to directly address it. Since this is in that sphere of commerce where the only time most people hear about it is when something scandalous happens, such as the FTX or Binance CEO scandals, or even look at the multitude of scam coins currently out there, with the Hawk Tua coin currently taking life savings by storm. So that in of itself will have people turn the game away because that is just not something they like and will avoid it regardless of it being optional in the game or not. The mere existence of this type of stuff within video games is rightfully looked down upon by people, as I cannot think of a single positive thing that has ever come from anybody even remotely discussing NFTs or crypto within video games. While this can be seen as inventive, I mean, Gunzilla themselves promote this as a way for players to truly own the items they purchase in-game, but I also can't remember anybody ever complaining about this, as I thought the point of live service titles was that, they didn't need sequels, so they could have a prolonged lifespan, players could hold on to items for a long period of time, and I'm gonna ignore you sitting right there, Overwatch 2. Get the fuck out of here. Seriously though, it's not like Fortnite, the god amongst all free-to-play live service games, deleted my items when the new chapter came out. It's all still there. Sure, if certain items are discontinued or vaulted or whatever they call it, and I had skins for them and it's gone, that's honestly fine. I can't really understand the justification for owning your items and possibly making something off them, because shouldn't they only grow in value if the game grows in popularity, thus making it more sought after? Or am I looking at things too plainly? Like, EVE Online has its own vast in-game economy, but it also has a well-established hardcore player base, and the game is probably one of the most daunting things I've ever seen. CSGO has its own crazy economy with its skins and cosmetics, so I can understand Gunzilla trying to check all of these big money-making boxes from other properties, but I do not see it really paying any dividends for them. So to me, this feels like something that could be preventing it from really succeeding and hitting a wide and major audience that will set the game up for long-term success. I think the gameplay has the potential to make this game last, but I think everything surrounding it, with the lack of content and depth to its currently underdelivered narrative, in addition to the whole NFT crypto side of things, keeping it from the largest PC gaming platform. Since I am not a person that got right into the game right at early access release, with the console releases coming a month later, it feels like a lot of things have gotten in the way of Off the Grid succeeding, because even with crossplay on, I cannot even get into a full 60-player lobby. So that can be a little disheartening to a player that might really want to dedicate themselves to a new game, or even find that first game to pour hours into with the hopes of becoming really good at and becoming one of the top players. They could also feel like this title might not be worth it, and then go find a new one, or stick to what's already established in the genre, which will probably be Apex, as it's the one game that Off the Grid resembles, at least with certain mechanics and aesthetics as well. That was how I personally felt when it came to a title like Splitgate, a genius concept of a Halo-esque Portal multiplayer shooter. It was loads of fun when it came out and when I played it with friends online, but I got into it at the tail end of its prime run, and shortly thereafter the game died off and matchmaking became less and less fun. So I had this feeling that I missed out on the prime days of Splitgate, and that could be a feeling some people will have jumping into Off the Grid for the first time here. Like I said, most times when I hop into a lobby and play, one or both of my teammates has the little blue logo indicating the person is paying for the Pro Pass, and it could be that the game may have already found its dedicated audience, albeit smaller than anticipated. The question remains though, will it be enough to sustain Off the Grid to fulfill its potential and finish the story it intends to tell? As much as I would love to see the game succeed, I just don't think it can, and if it does fail, then I really hope it is not the end for Gunzilla specifically, as I think they have the potential to make great games in the future. To start wrapping up this video, I wish to make it abundantly clear for like the 4th or 5th time at this point, I do like playing off the grid. I think it is fun, and I do not mind the fact that I'm not good at it. I want to be clear about that because sometimes people can't handle criticism against a game they like, and they'll label it as jealousy, or again, being the result of someone being trash at a game they do like. The reason I made this video is because I enjoy playing it. It is because I happen to enjoy the previous works of some of the people involved as well. So, I sit here puzzled, questioning the fact that with all of these creative resources at their disposal and with the ideas they had for this immersive world with the roots of something that could be interesting in the world of sci-fi video games, they decided to take all of that and make a battle royale shooter in 2024. And it's not even fully completed either. Why bring in names that have had work succeed in film, television, and gaming to have all that combined into what will feel like just another free-to-play BR shooter to forget about? I think it's clear that unless the full release of this game arrives and blows everybody away, that unfortunately Off the Grid, like many live service titles before it, is a waste of some fun gameplay mechanics, but really in this case it's a waste of talent and a great idea. And welcome to the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching to this point in the video. If you enjoyed it, please remember to leave a like on the video. If you really enjoyed it and want to stick around for more, please remember to subscribe. We keep growing with every single post we make, so that's been pretty cool to see. Our last post, our video on Chaos Reigns, got over 1,000 views. That's the first video in my lifetime probably on YouTube, of making other channels in the past when I was like 12. And, you know, doing this, our first video to hit 1,000 views, so that's, I know, another milestone. So it's really cool. And again, I thank you. I welcome all the people that subscribed off that video if you happen to be watching this right now. But enough babbling. This is just a little end video, and I'm not scripting this. This is just off the cuff. So, you know, the usual, like, subscribe if you haven't already. If not, I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you guys in the next one. The next video we're doing will be the long form review on Hi-Fi Rush, and then after that, we're doing Indiana Jones. So it'll be a while for those two videos, so I'll see you in those. So again, have a great day. See you later.